Buongiorno, good afternoon, persons of quality. Welcome to the final talk this year in the Aquinas lecture series. Our presenter today is Dr. Robert Marko of the Theology Department. Dr. Marko has taught and studied in the Ukraine, and his topic today for his presentation is, as you can see up here, Christianity in the Borderland, Religious Tradition in Western Ukraine. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Marko.
Thanks, Brett. I really appreciate you being in charge of this, being as competent as you are, so everything will come across well, I hope. There are a couple comments I'd like to make beforehand. One is I'm grateful both to the J. William Fulbright Board of the State Department for the funding that I had for the past semester in Ukraine during the fall of 2008. I'm secondly grateful to the Aquinas Faculty Development Fund, which subsidized part of my travel before that in 2007 to do some research in the area. Much of my remarks, therefore, are going to focus on my own experience, and hopefully this machine will work. I'm just learning how to do this. So let's see. The topic is on the board there. Christianity in the Borderland, Religious Tradition in Western Ukraine. What I'm going to speak about is the area, probably if this works. No, this doesn't. This will be the area I was in, during most of my stay, which is Lviv, Halichina, Galicia, in that area there. And if you notice the map here, it gives you kind of a sense of the religious traditions in the area. This area here is predominantly Catholic, essentially Greek Catholic, as you can see. This is the map of the area in general. This is the border of the 1918 independent Western Ukrainian National Republic. This is 1918, so you have this will give you some indication. There'll be some reference to some of this in passing. I would like to begin, though, with a piece from YouTube. I'm not an expert in using this, but I want to just begin with there because I think it may set the tone. Actually, I have not seen this clip before, even though I'm a fan of the series, but when I wrote my proposal for Fulbright, I spoke specifically about the game of Risk. Some of you may have seen this before. Escape does it? That's good. All right, okay. Now I want to get down to here. All right, YouTube. Here's a piece here. There it is. Now I make this big. Correct. All right. Okay, get back here. And then hit play. Who's this? Sorry, very good. All right, is this play? No, it isn't. The other end of it is play. All right, here's a... Now, there should be volume to this, too? Volume. That'll do it. Absolutely. Hogan, I agree.
Of Western Europe.
All right.
And I've left you teetering on the brink of complete annihilation.
I'm not beaten yet. I still have armies in the Ukraine.
Yeah, the Ukraine. You know what the Ukraine is? It's a sitting duck. A road apple, Newman. The Ukraine is weak. It's feeble. I think it's time to put the hurt on the Ukraine.
I come from Ukraine. You not say Ukraine weak?
Yeah, well, we're playing a game here, pal.
Ukraine is game to you? How about I take your little Boris?
All right. They're all kind of lessons in that. Thank you there. I think it was a good choice to have you as provost.
Good for something.
Yeah, for something, yes.
Good for something.
I think probably Chesley would have been better, but you know he's not in history. In any event, okay. What I would like to talk about is three ideas, and they're somewhat interrelated. One is the religion in Ukraine as a constituent element of national identity, particularly the role of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. And we can say something about that historically, and then my personal reflections on the theme of passion and resurrection. So these are the kind of themes. Let me begin. In an outstanding paper, one that I will draw on during my presentation, at a 2007 conference on religion and identity at the John Paul II Catholic University in Lublin, Poland, Dr. Ola Tori, the director of the Institute of Church History and professor of history at Ukrainian Catholic University, writes this: Christian tradition constitutes a significant part of the diverse and versatile religious legacy of Ukraine. It verges on the impossible to understand any aspect of Ukrainian cultural, social, political, or even ecumenical life of the last millennium without taking into account the contribution of Christianity with its canons, teachings, liturgical practices, ethical norms, communal and personal spirituality, sacral art, and folk piety. In fact, religious life in the Ukrainian territories has been diversified for a long time by the presence of Jews, Muslims, as well as the preservation of original customs and local ceremonies. Okay, now my focus will be this area here, as I mentioned to you, around here. And I will kind of look at this area. But this is a slide of the city of Lviv, which is ranked by the London Times as the third most beautiful city in Europe. And actually it is. The infrastructure has some real problems because of economic considerations. But it's considered to be one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. If you've been to Krakow, some of you may have been there. It's somewhat similar without the river, and actually in many ways much more attractive. I use at the beginning the patron saint of Lviv, which is St. Yuri. St. Yuri is killing the dragon. And I'll say more about this later. There's a real public sense of religion in the city. And it's always maintained that even some, it certainly went underground during the period of the Soviet domination. But if you look outside the police department, the statue outside of there is St. Yuri. This is a common map of the city, and I'm going to indicate to you, I think it indicates something about the religious emphasis there. You'll see, among other things, how does this thing work? This is the central square area, the Polish cathedral. Over here we find a church that's affiliated with the Kievan Patriarchate Church. I'll say more about that later. The Ukrainian historic traditions are four. Three are Orthodox jurisdictions. One is Greek Catholic jurisdiction, plus there's a good number of Roman Catholics and Protestants. This is the Dominican Church. It used to be a warehouse. This is Transfiguration. No, I think this is the Armenian Cathedral. Sorry. You'll notice that, and I'm not going to show you all the statues and stuff, but there's a real strong religious presence even in the statues in the city, and I'll say more about this later. In any event, as you know, since we have several Russian historians here, right? How many Russians? Two of you at least, right? We have more Russian historians at this institution than, with the possible exception of the Irish historians, and I see one at the table there. With the possible exception of Irish historians, this place is very well supplied with Russian historians. So I would please feel free to correct any of the presentation. As you know, most of you know, in 988, Prince Vladimir the Great established Christianity in its Byzantine Slavic tradition as the national religion in this country, which in a real sense became then the nation of Kiev Rus. Some have suggested this is really the beginning point of the country. This happened before the schism of 1054 that divided Christian East from West, and I know there are people from Eastern traditions here under the Patriarchate of Constantinople. But the Kievan Church inherited that tradition and was actually part of the Patriarchate of Constantinople, and yet remained in full communion with the Latin West and its patriarch, the Pope of Rome. This is a slide of Vladimir and his grandmother Olha. Before Vladimir, legend has it that the first called of the apostles, Andrew, erected the cross on the hills of Cave. There's no hard evidence for that claim. One of the statues you'll see, and this is in Cave. This is near the Sofiski sub-border. You'll see the statue of St. Andrew. However, it's not until the 8th century then that we can determine with some certainty the penetration of Christianity into the lands of Rus Ukraine. The apostles of the Slavs, Cyril and Methodius, declared by John Paul II of happy memory as co-patrons of Europe, were certainly in Crimea in the mid-9th century. This is a photo I took actually in Mukachevo, which is in the Carpathian Mountains. It's interesting, in this city you have both Cyril and Methodius, and you also have, this being a Hungarian city at one time, you also have Calvin. So there's a statue in this area of Calvin. Before Vladimir, his grandmother Olha willed to be baptized in 955. Therefore, the baptism of Ukraine under Vladimir in 988 was a culminating event. To be sure, it may have been his interest in an alliance with Byzantium that led to the baptism in the Byzantine tradition. Yet the Rus Chronicles credit the divine liturgy as celebrated in Constantinople's Church of Hagia Sophia as the inspiration for Vladimir's acceptance of Christianity. And the Chronicles recall, as you may have heard, "We know not whether we were in heaven or earth. Surely God dwells with the Greeks." Here's a slide of that particular place. You can see now it's now become Istanbul, and it's under it's now a museum. Actually, John Benedict, when he went to Turkey, visited there with members of different traditions. Let me briefly summarize some of the history. I've done some of this before, but I want to go through this as quickly as possible. There was rapid development of Christianity in the area around Rus, coinciding, by the way, with the rise of the Kievan Rus state. Using the Bulgarian church as a model, Yaroslav the Wise achieved some ecclesial independence from Constantinople, overseeing the installation of a metropolitan archbishop of Kiev and all Rus. That occurred in 1037. Essentially, Rusan natives dominated the episcopacy, whose sees were located in various regions governed by the family of the Grand Prince. As you all know, there was a split in the church in 1054, the third great schism, official schism. There certainly is one earlier. The ascendancy of Kievan Rus was short-lived, however. Rival cities resented the control by Kiev and sought independence, and you'll see some of this on the slide. I'll skip some of the text here. But in any event, the area we're going to look at will be in the area near Galiciana, or Halicina. This is the area of the Ukrainians in the southwest. The dismemberment of the Kiev Rus opened Ukraine to invasion from nearby rivals. No, I've used that term Ukraine. Is there a Ukraine nation? No, not at all. Teutonic Knights, Hungarians, Lithuanians, and Poles, all of whom relished the wealth from there. And from the east, we find the Mongols. And as you know, again, they're nomadic people who swept through Rus in the 13th century, burning and sacking cities. In 1299, Maxim, the Metropolitan Archbishop of Kiev and all Rus, left the depopulated city of Kiev for Vladimir. His successor moved the primary Rusan see then, 26 years later, to Moscow. So what I'm claiming, of course, is this: is that the original see, and the historians here certainly know that the original see was Cave Rus, as well as the original capital. But things changed by the 14th century. In the West, where I taught and researched, the princes of Halicz and Volhynia, whose dominions bordered Roman Catholic Hungary and Poland, forged the United States with the remnants of the Kievan Rus, absorbing actually Kiev itself. One son's prince, and this is Danilo, you'll see him on this slide here, opened Halicina to Armenians, Balts, Germans, Hungarians, Jews, and Lithuanians, and formed a very interesting city around this. Of course, the city exists before Danilo. He strengthened alliances with neighboring Catholic powers and even enlisted the aid of the papacy. In 1253, Galician Grand Prince Daniel was crowned king by representative of the Pope through, and I think this is interesting, and under the juris through a consecrator from the Orthodox Church in Constantinople. This idea of a split of who's Orthodox and who's Catholic and whatever is much more complicated than we think. All right. In any event, I'll try to go through this rather quickly. A definitive break in this area came between the Russian and Roman churches came only in 1439. For in that year, Isidore, who was the metropolitan of Kiev, Moscow, and all Rus, was represented the church at a council in Florence. He approved full reunion with Rome, came back, and it was not well received. Okay, all right, all right. While this metropolitan was working toward reunion, a new metropolitate then arose in Moscow, north of Kiev. This church refused to accept the Union of Florence, separated from Kiev, and announced its autocephalous status. In 1589, with Greek Orthodoxy and Constantinople subject to the Turkish domination, the Church of Moscow then becomes a patriarchate. And as you've seen, if any of you have seen Eisenstein's film on Ivan Gortsky and Ivan the Great, Ivan the Magnificent, Ivan the Terrible, Ivan the Awesome, whatever you want to translate it, you'll see him speaking. This is the Third Rome. Now that the line from the film predates the coming of this area or being seen by the Russians as the Third Rome. The partition of Poland I want to go back one. Here. Let's go here. I had a slide on this, and I can't particularly find it right now. The partition of Poland in the late 18th century, and we'll skip the dates, divided Ukraine even further. When the western lands fell under Austrian rule, the Greek Catholic hierarchy received the support and protection of the imperial government, and it was under this Habsburg rule that the former Uniates became to be officially called Greek Catholics, generally to distinguish them from the Armenians, because there were Armenian Catholics in the area. The civil authorities encouraged the formation of an ecclesiastical administrative structure for the Greek Catholics, and therefore in 1771, Mukachevo in Transcarpathia has an eparchy restored. And then in 1807, this is a very significant event, the metropolity of Halicina in western Ukraine was completely restored. While in Lviv, I saw a marvelous exhibition at a museum that marks this significant move. It's because what begins to happen in the 19th century is the people of this area began to self-identify in terms of nationality as Ukrainians. And a paper that began the academic year was very interesting. They began the academic year with divine liturgy and an academic paper. But Oleg Torre began talking about specifically the significance of the event under Maria Theresa in 1807 because it really was the spur for Ukrainian nationalism. Okay. You'll notice here, this is the slide of the reunion of West and East. The Union of Brest. All right, this is one of the other complete figures here. This is St. Josaphat. All right. I'm going to skip some of this. This is one of the leaders of the Cossacks. What begins to happen in the 17th century is that in the fights with the Poles, the Cossacks form an alliance with the Russians. All right. Okay. The partition of Poland. Here's the Polish partition, as you can see. I want to fast forward to the 20th century. I'm very conscious of time. And when I look at this, I want to look at the character Metropolitan Andrzej Szeptycki, and who is a Polish nobleman, as I hear in Divine Liturgy. Father Michael refers to him as the Polish nobleman, rightly so, of Ukrainian descent, committed to church renewal, ecumenism, the arts, and vociferous opponent both of the Nazis and communists. Metropolitan Andrzej shepherded the church during World War I, and then Soviet and Nazi occupation. This is an interesting photo of him. He's an incredibly interesting character. I had a chance to visit his tomb in St. Uri's Cathedral or Sobor. All right. In 1919, I have a couple dates there that may be significant. You kind of need dates in history, as some of you may know. For purposes here, it's after the 1917 revolution. A movement arose in the area of the West, demanding Ukrainian independence. So I have a couple dates there. After the war, Halychina becomes part of Poland. All right. You go through the 20s and 30s, and then in 1939 you have the famous non-aggression pact between the Nazis and the communists, and Galicia is given to the Soviet Union. It's interesting. There have been very few periods in which Western Ukraine was under any kind of Russian domination. It was the basic. They were under Russian dominion in a period during World War I, as they were fighting in that area. And then in 1939, for the second time, when as the agreement between the Nazis and the communists gave the area to the Soviet Union, and then finally, as you know, after World War II, they become part of one of the Soviet republic systems. Okay. I mentioned some other facts here, and just go through this quickly. These are the Germans coming in. This is part of what was destroyed in Lviv. Much was left. What happened is when they came, but the Germans pulled out real quickly, did not destroy the city. I have only been to Warsaw Airport. Those of you who've been to Warsaw know there's much destruction, obviously, there, right? Chad's been there. Krakow, likewise, doesn't have much destruction, but in this area there was great destruction. Not in this area, but in certain areas like Warsaw, there's great destruction. All right, now let's say some things about this. In 1946, all right, we have a pseudo-synod. What leads up to it? In April 1945, Soviet troops arrested every Ukrainian Greek Catholic bishop and member of the intelligentsia and sent them to gulags. 11 months later, Soviet authorities rounded up 216 priests at gunpoint, forced them to sever ties with Rome, and request communion with the Russian Orthodox Church. Again, all the bishops had been arrested, and over 1,000 clergy were sent to prison for refusing to support the pseudo-synod. The only bishops present were Orthodox or those illicitly ordained. Here is St. Uri's. It is now the site of the Archeparchy of Lviv of the Greek Catholics, but this is where this took place. In a booklet that I've given some of you, let me read this. Male and female religious, lay faithful, and hundreds of priests who refused to convert, often with their wives and children, were arrested and sent to labor camps where they endured horrific hardships. Subsequently, it was in those parishes where the priests had been arrested that became the backbone of the underground. The faithful sang outside closed churches or worshipped at churches not registered with the regime. Priests who had avoided arrest tried to make pastoral visits to those underground communities. It was the nuns who maintained contact between the priest and the laity. One of my students, Sister Valentia, makes a very important point about this. arranging secret services, and catechizing children. Again, the nuns are doing the hard work, as you sisters know. Here are some slides. This is a priest and his family sent out to a gulag. These are religious women. It's not quite the habits that you might have. They got the babushka, all right. Here is one of the orders as part of the suppression of the church. What happens is an underground church arises, of course. People come to apartments. This is another significant figure, and this is Cardinal Joseph Supplee. Cardinal Supplee was the model for Morris West's novel, The Shoes of the Fisherman, which some of you may have read or have seen film of. If you remember that, Anthony Quinn plays a figure there. In any event, in 1963, he makes it to the West, and one of the things he does, well, in a short time, he's in a gulag, and they send him to an apartment in Moscow, and there he secretly ordains somebody, which they always do. I mean, they're always ordaining somebody in apartments over there. Actually, very interesting. This is not part of the lecture, but if you look at how married priests were ordained for the Ukrainian church, you know, probably some of you may know, since 1929 in the United States and in the diaspora, you had to be celibate. What you would do is go over to some apartment with the underground church, and someone would ordain you an apartment. Would have been a good consideration there, Williams. All right, all right. Think about it, huh? Only you knew. All right. If you look at this, this is the tomb of Supplee, but he is not in the ground. If you go into the church, St. Yuri's, everybody else is buried in the ground. He knows he's going back to where he thinks the Patriarchate should be, which is in cave. So he had his, when he was entombed, when they brought him back after the freeing of the legality of the church, but he did not get entombed in the ground like everyone else did. Okay. In any event, during the period of Glasnost and other things in the 1980s, we have Gorbachev's policy of openness, and because of that, your huge outdoor rallies are celebrated, demonstrations of young people occur, people are back in their religious habits, etc. All right. Here's part of this underground period still. Young boy going to everybody in Ukraine goes to confession all the time. It's very interesting. Now the Greeks don't do much of that, do they, over there, Mrs. Krondyke, right? Slavics do it a lot, as you may know. I mean, Serbs and Russians and Ukrainians go to confession an awful lot. Here is a celebration outside of a church. Priest celebrating in the woods. This is not a miracle. This is my screw up on the. This is not a miracle. This man is not coming out of the animal. All right, is not coming out of the cup. I'll have you know. All right. Oh dear God. That's Father Andre. I'll say more about him later. Father Andre. All right. Celebrating again outside. They always bring flags too. It's great. They have flags for everything during the liturgy. Both the Polish Roman Catholics and the Ukrainian Greek Catholics are always having flags. They go up and down. Women usually get to do the flag stuff, right? They may be stronger. I suspect they are there. All right. Here are some bishops demanding the freedom of the church. All right. All right. Here's some women who are actually more powerful than the hierarchs demanding the freedom of the church. Okay. Let me make one or two last comments on this. In 89, the government permits the Greek Catholic communities to register. Enlivened by this success, they take possession of former churches, sometimes with force. It happened. The disposition of the Russian Orthodox Church from Western Ukraine. And what happened is people in Western Ukraine knew many who were Russian Orthodox. This is not a Russian Orthodox area. Not at all. This is primarily a Greek Catholic area, some Polish Roman Catholics, an Autocephalous Orthodox Church, and this is a place where you have Kiev and Patriarchs Church taking some hold. But what began to happen is it deteriorated relationships between the Catholic and the Russian Orthodox Church. Independence came in 1991. and the Greek Catholic Church reemerged as a significant political force in this country of, at that time, about 47 million. In 2001, John Paul II visits Ukraine and beatifies some martyrs and confessors. In 2005, much to the chagrin of Moscow, Patriarch Lubomir, Cardinal Hussar, restores or returns the principal see of the Greek Catholics to Kyiv, reinforcing the Ukrainians' independence from both Poland and Russia. All right. What I'd like to suggest is this is an area where all these religious traditions come together. It's a fascinating area. Let me say some things about statistics and some of the religions. I'm relying on U.S. State Department officials' data. That's where because there's conflicting data in there. But in any event, the latest survey I have seen, and I've gone to the State Department data online, suggests that in 2007, about 77% of the people of Ukraine are religious believers. Those that proclaim themselves as belonging to one tradition or denomination are about half of that number. Of these, 33% are affiliated with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Kyiv Patriarchate. And I'll say more about that in a minute. Basically, this is a group that after independence declared its freedom from Moscow, became very, very pro-Ukrainian. This happens in 91, 92. Very interesting. You know, the breakup of the Soviet Union is 1991, and following there is some disagreement about where the Orthodox Church will go. So there's a whole group that splits from Moscow at this time. All right. In any event, that is probably, from the statistics I've seen, the largest group of believers in Ukraine. 31% are affiliated with Moscow, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Moscow Patriarchate. Was Laura here? I thought I saw her. Is she gone? Yeah, but where she worked in an orphanage in the east, that is under Moscow Patriarchate, right? Okay. 18% are affiliated with the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. 2.5% with the Ukrainian Autocephalous Orthodox Church. Less than 5% of those surveyed declared themselves either Roman Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, or Jews. For our purposes, adherents of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church constitute the second largest group of believers after the Orthodox group. They are found mostly in Western Ukraine. They number approximately over 4 million. And again, those figures vary. They've also moved to the east in many ways, because as you may know, when the Soviets educated you, they also told you where you had to live and eat, or eat, work, etc. They split up the family system. One of the things they did immediately is split up the family system. And in Western Ukraine, it's very strong. Actually, people would rather live in economic hardship than leave their family. And I know this from talking to students consistently. All right. We have some other figures. We have Muslims estimate that there are about 2 million Muslims in Ukraine, although the government estimates that to be about 1/4 of that amount, about 500,000. Most of those are in Crimea, where you have the Tatar population. I didn't touch them because I rushed through here. The Ukrainian Roman Catholic Church, which is fairly strong in Western Ukraine, being that this was under Poland, is about I would say maybe 1 million, 500,000 to 1 million. I'll have to check the stats on this. Most of the pockets are in Western Ukraine, but there's also some in central Ukraine and the east. I visited in the east. Lviv has several Roman Catholic churches. One is a cathedral, where they have three for those who come out of the Catholic tradition, there are 3 specifically Catholic archdioceses in Lviv. The dominant one is the Greek Catholics, the second one is Roman, and third is the Armenian Catholics. So there's the strangest confession story I would ever retell occurred. I mentioned this to Gary Eberly. I was preparing on this program, Lingvu. Everybody goes to confession there all the time, like every month. You can't go to communion otherwise, they kind of say, but it's not enforced. But I was preparing on this Lingvu my sinfulness, and I remembered enough Latin I could do that. I had to translate the Latin to Russian, and then the system allowed Latin to be translated into Russian, but not into Ukrainian. And then I had to go from Russian to Ukrainian. And then I had it all prepared. I wrote on index cards. I left the house, and I wound up waiting in line. Thank God the nun was ahead of me for 20 minutes, because I had a dictionary and trying to figure out from my Ukrainian dictionary, how am I going to tell this Polish priest what I've done, or what I want to do. But in any event, it was the strangest experience I've ever had. All right. This will give you some indication of some of the areas here. You'll find here, there's a lot of neo-paganism there. Actually, it's mixed with religious, with some of the more historic Christian traditions. This is a vatra. It's based on a kind of fire. I mean, they go outside and they sing and they light fires and things like that. And this is actually from summer school a couple years ago. This is a photo I did not get on the internet. But you'll find a lot of monks. A lot of these guys are monks and standing around there. But they celebrate and preserve to a large degree the pagan customs. Very interesting. They celebrate and preserve some of the pagan customs. I noticed that Terry and Mary have in the chapel a program that they run that they're advertising the summer school, which I would certainly suggest some of you get a chance. It would be worthwhile to go to. Because the summer school experience, and I know Gary and I have talked about the Carpathian Mountains. It's actually a wonderful experience for people to learn English. It helps the students there learn English and also accommodate you to the culture. All right. There's synagogue in one of the cities south of Lviv. This is what remains of it. Large Jewish population. And I cannot find the data on this right now, but as I looked at the data, in 1930s, if I am remembering correctly, and I can be wrong on this, the city of Lviv had 50% of the population was Polish, 30% was Jewish, and 20% was Ukrainian. Afterwards, after the war and the force, well, after two events. One is the Holocaust, obviously, what Patrick Dubois calls the Holocaust by bullets, the elimination of the Jewish population. And after the forced replacement of citizens from Poland and Ukraine, the statistics are about 90-some% Ukrainian. This is one of the synagogues, it's one of the cemeteries. I visited a lot of cemeteries. And this, again, is an original, this was from two years ago. This is in Crimea where the Tartars are. It's a mosque. These are Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses make up a substantial part of the Christian population. I know there's some concern about how you classify them, but as believers who have some affiliation with Christianity. And these are going off to the gulags. They are native Ukrainians. The Jehovah's Witnesses are natives. This is a Mormon, this is a Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints building. Unlike the Jehovah's, who are native Ukrainians, they are mostly clean-cut Americans and Canadians and maybe Western Europeans. But it's very different. These two traditions have a strong presence there. The dominant tradition, of course, is the historic churches. This is at one of the parks outside of Lviv. Close to this area is where all the wealthy people lived. That is the university professors. I remember going in there. The university professors had the big bucks, and the government gave them, probably in exchange for their souls, very nice housing. You know. All right. I'm trying not to be political, but this is the bell tower in Kyiv. Any of you been to Kyiv? Some of you been? No, but this is the bell tower at the museum church there. All right, Sofisky Sobor, which is now run by the government. No religious organization is able to dominate there. Given the fighting between the groups, it's understandable. All right. This is again part of that particular church. It's actually very impressive. More impressive probably on the outside than the inside, because it goes back almost 1,000 years. Now this is again another view of Kyiv in the area around the major churches. In the west, you have a Dominican church. This is called the Dominican Cathedral. To God alone is honor and glory. This is a very popular church with young people. Young people go all the time. All right. Very strong popular. I'm amazed at the young people that go there. This is a public symbol of Mary. I may have shown this in the past. It's the Western statue of the Immaculate Conception. What happened is in this what they call now Freedom Square, on the other end there used to be a statue of Lenin. They immediately ripped that down. It was outside the Opera House, and you find very public religious symbols throughout this place. This is a Studite monastery. Here is where Clement Sheptypsky hid Jews during the Nazi occupation. One of the churches, notice how Baroque, and it's Eastern, Western, it's this hybrid thing, and that's precisely the church in that area, and that's fine. This would drive ritualists crazy, because what are you, whatever, the purists would go crazy on this. All right, this is a Kievan Patriarchate church, which goes back to the Greeks coming in. Actually, the Greeks had this church, then the Greek Catholics, and then after the war, after the Soviets took over, I don't know what it was. Most of the churches were warehouses, actually, and then now is under the Kievan Patriarchate. Armenian church. This is from online. This is not my photo. This is an Armenian church cathedral. All right, let me talk about the contribution here for a couple minutes, and then I'm not going to conclude my remarks. I spent too much on history as usual. All right. Well, I asked some colleagues and students what exactly they thought about the contribution of the church and the university. So I want to just make some reference to that now. And I just listed their names there. So let me read some of the comments and with my own editorial comments. Okay. One such is a photojournalist by the name of Michael Rosinski, who I had a chance to go to Krakow with. And he is a photojournalist, and he's teaching English there. And here's what he says. I just want to share this with you. Christianity has a very definitive impact on Ukraine in two different ways. The first is through the culture. If you were to interview and contrast a Ukrainian and an American, one of the most notable differences would be in the intensity of culture. America certainly has a culture, I'm not sure of that. And it has taken shape and evolved over time, yet it's hard to define American culture exactly. Mike's saying this, when I taught American culture here last semester, I was dumbfounded to realize there wasn't much to say. Americans draw much on their cultural reference from conflict, whether it be war, politics, religion, or race. Many Americans define their identity based upon various conflicts and use them not only as a reference point for their lives, but to form their culture. For example, war veterans often define themselves based on the war they fought in, identifying with this unit or ship or branch of the military service. Likewise, people often find identity within monikers of Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. Each one comes from a conflict or opposition of some sort, and each gives birth to its own cultural identity. And here's the key point, I think. In Ukraine, the church is the protector of positive creative culture. It preserves not only Christian traditions, but interesting enough, old pagan ones as well. The church has preserved some old traditions as making them their own. Secondly, the church has preserved Ukraine as a nation. There's no question about that. The Ukrainian state has failed countless times, and modern-day Ukraine has changed hands several times in the past century, yet the people have remained a nation. Faith keeps them united through struggles, of which they've had many, and it gives them an identity. Ukraine has suffered terribly, but the Ukrainian people are very tough, as some of you may know if you're Ukrainian, because of the struggles they've been through. Likewise, they have a strong sense of identity because they all come from the same church and faith. And again, I will say more about this, but it's interesting that there's a movement in Ukraine for a Kievan church, which would include communion between those who are Greek Catholic with the two Ukrainian independent churches which seek union with Constantinople. They want recognition. And with the Moscow Church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, Moscow Patriarchate. There's been plans. Now, Moscow is not part of the discussion, let me clue you. But there has been part of a discussion with many of these people saying that we share the same liturgy, we have the same faith, we're the same nation. And therefore, we need to look at this and form one church that's going to be fully in communion with Moscow, the Third Rome, Constantinople, the second Rome, and Rome, the first Rome. Okay. All right. Mike continues this. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church has a lot of credibility with the people. One of my housemates, I lived with 10 students in Libya. Actually, it was a great experience. They're good guys, and I relished that experience as serving as curator of the house. But one of them, Petro Demodouros, says this. He begins as following, by apologizing for his poor written English. I've never seen an American student do this when they handed in an assignment beforehand. All right, I apologize. First, Dr. Robert, I am sorry for my English. No, never. He says this. It's some phenomena of mankind. Again, they use exclusive rather than inclusive language, but they don't know any better. All right, it isn't sexism. It's just dictionaries. When we have something we don't appreciate, but when we lose it or it's inaccessible for us, we begin to understand how valuable it was. It's true for many occasions, and religious questions are not exceptions. Yes, if we remind the time of underground work in our church, we will see that our grandparents and parents were going to secret places to take the Eucharist. There's no question that this has been part of their experience. At midnight, soldiers came to every house to see, are there icons on the wall or not? Are you going to church to pray or not pray, etc. Communism placed obstacles in the ways, but it didn't stop our ancestors from keeping the faith, and now it's our turn, etc. The university is very interesting because the university has become a kind of sense of, it's the most progressive school in Ukraine. The Fulbright recognizes it. You know, if you know anything about government employees and you know anything about American secular culture, then, you know, the Catholic Church is not seen as the most progressive organization in the world by some. This may come as a shock to some of you. But for some people, actually they don't like it at all. But in any event, it's interesting consistently, they say that this is the place to be. Ukrainian Catholic University is the place to be because it takes the best from the West, as well as whatever was best from the Soviet system, and puts them together. And I think it's very interesting. Okay. Actually, the university publishes more stuff than anyone else. I had a chance to be at a conference on Jewish urban history and looked particularly at the at anti-Semitism. And one of the speakers, Omar Bartiv, claimed that not all Ukrainians are anti-Semitic, only those in the West. But it was very interesting. There was a rabbi who taught at the Judaic Institute at Peter Mahela Academy, who mentioned in contrast to that position that his institute, the Judaic Institute, and the Ukrainian Catholic University are co-publishing a work particularly on anti-Semitism, the Holocaust in Ukraine, and a book called Illusions, Kurt Lewin, Working Your Way or Looking Through Illusions. I forget the exact title. But I think that's very interesting. A colleague of mine, a very brilliant young patristic scholar, puts it this way. Christianity is integral for Ukraine. Statistics say that 80% self-identify as Christian. Only 3 to 5% live according to Christian norms, which may be higher than most of us in the United States, but it's interesting. Is the nation good? Is the religion good for the country? Absolutely, you'll say. It isn't because he's being paid by the university. It's a cultural phenomenon. It's great potential. And then I have a comment from the director of international program who said the same thing, Elena DeJoda. She emphasizes how important that is. Let me give you one piece here on the university. Escape, right? All right, now. What you have here is a university website in English, and it'll give you kind of an indication of the university. This is the first Catholic university in the former Soviet republics. Certainly there's some in what was communist Poland, but in the Soviet republics. It has a history like ours that it goes back. You know, Aquinas says it was founded, where's the nuns? Diane, what do we say, 1886 or something? Yeah, we say that, but, you know. And likewise, the university claims it goes back, you know, I can claim, I think legitimate, the same way as Aquinas can claim to go back to the foundation of a theological academy and academy for training of priests. So here's something about it. Here's their summer programs. If I can get there. If it works. It's coming. All right. They have summer programs. I certainly recommend anybody. There's schools of culture, They're telling you how wonderful it is, of course. And that's right. I mean, it's actually a great place to be. City's great, and the people are wonderful. All right, here you go. I know Eric is going to go to iconography school there, right? In the summer. I have some brochures here and other things, but this will give you kind of indication there. And let me close, and then we can talk for a minute. I'm going to skip a lot of stuff, and as I always need to do, and I'll go back to the PowerPoint and just give you some slides. Here's St. Uri's Cathedral. Now, what do I do to get back to? I probably need this, right? This thing. St. Uri's Cathedral in Lviv. This is the university. This is John Paul II and his visit there in 2001 when he beatified the martyrs of Ukraine. I lived in a house that was named after one of the martyrs, St. Andrew, who was shot outside the house and knifed by Soviet authorities. He refused to leave. He refused to leave, and they got him. One of the vice rectors came over and said, "Now, don't all young Ukrainian men want to be martyrs?" I don't know if they answered him or not. Here's pilgrimages, tons of pilgrimages. This is a photo of, and Jason Duncan recognizes this is Father Taras. This was not, remember Father Taras? I was going to blackmail Jason and take a photo of him kissing his hand when we left for asking his permission and use it against him for his tenure review here, but I didn't have to do that, all right? All right. They did, oh yeah. Here's this. I remember this day. One of the guys I lived with was from the eastern part of the state, Sumi. Actually, we spent some time at his parents' place. His mother is has adopted many children and works with the derelicts and the homeless in the city. He's particularly Roman. Volodya's Roman Catholic. What's interesting is I think the East needs the West. There's a real strong universal sense that the Western Church has that those of you who come out of Eastern traditions know you can tend to be ethnocentric. Are you aware of, right? So there's a universality. I remember this. We were in an Irish place in Lviv. It was an Irish restaurant, and it was the day that Alexei II died. All right. This is the theology. This is a theology building on campus. Not far from it, it's a seminary. They have a couple campuses for the university. Here's myself in my old man socks with students at ESS. Again, I'm trying to encourage you. Those are my Ukrainian socks. I think they're about 10 cents American money. All right, you see those? All right. The city itself has 110,000 students. It's incredible. Again, students, this I got offline, but it's very common. You'll find before liturgy many students at church. Many students are continually going to confession. He actually looks like a little bit like Father Daly at the Antiochian church, doesn't he? All right. All right. This is a picture of myself with some of my students. And what they wanted was they wanted nuns in their brochures. So nuns in habits. All right. Okay. So this is a completely posed picture. I look like I'm interested. All right. Okay. All right, Passion and Resurrection. I'm going to say much about this. Here are some of the heroes of the time. You got this as I actually kissed the remains of this guy's glass-enclosed body. This is Theodore Roshma from Uzhhorod. The Soviets did him in. A great story on him. I don't have time to do it, but this is the guy who our house was named after. Again, another priest murdered by the authorities. Here are some of the Ukrainian martyrs. I had a chance to be present. Let's get back here. I might go back. Whatever I did. I did something stupid. All right. I don't even know if you can get back there, but I just want to comment here. The sisters martyrs, I had a chance to attend their chapel and kiss the remains of the nuns. I kissed more bodies and tombs than I probably ever want to. It actually wasn't bad. It was actually a very moving experience. All right, here we go. Here we go. All right, here's Romja. This is Father Andre. These are some of the sisters. Olympia Lavrentia. Some of you know, Steve knows these gals. All right, not personally, but here's the resurrection, and this is Romja as resurrected. This is the church in Sumy. The Moscow will not allow. This is how much power they have in the East. they will not allow the building, even though this is Ukraine, independent Ukraine, the church there, the Russian Orthodox Church, will not allow the building of any Greek Catholic churches in the East. So this is a Roman church, Polish priest. Nigerian graduate students, fascinating experience there. Liturgy is in Polish, Russian, and Ukrainian. The gospel is read by Nigerians in English. It really sold me on the importance of a universality of the church. This is the church that also takes care of the homeless. But I was just amazed at how much the East, which I tend to romanticize, really needs the West. And I think this is one example of it. This is Immaculate Conception Church, which would be anathema in Eastern terms anyway, using that terminology, although the doctrine is held in different ways. But it is one of the fine churches that they have, one of the few. They've gotten rid of, all these are pre-Soviet. Once they got into power, forget it. Here's this schema I spent an hour and a half on. Where's Chad? He helped me with this. I put the circles up. Here's an image of some Kievan church, which consists of those in communion with Rome, with Moscow, and with the Ecumenical Patriarchate. All right, this is their dream. All right, questions? I don't want to, I've gone too long. What are some thoughts or reflections? And please leave if you must. Yeah, go ahead, Jason. Well, I'll tell you, it's backfired in many respects. I mean, it's backfired. I mean, young people are incredibly religious. I mean, they're like everybody, right? You know, they probably party too much, they screw around, they do whatever, but they're very, very religious. I mean, not where I was in Western Ukraine. I mean, so this is a church persecuted. So if you're in church persecuted, no. Actually, I did not find much. Now, you might find that, I mean, you know, the League of the Militant Godless was gotten rid of in 1947. Stalin suspended much of their work during the Second World War because the Orthodox Church, as you know, became his ally and a protector of the fatherland. And so there is not much in where I was. Let me say, there's very, very religious. And very much, they have very strong memories. They don't forget. And they know who was on their side, and they know who took care of them. They knew that becoming a cleric or becoming a bishop is not a career move. I may have said this before. It is signing your own death warrant. It's you are signing. It's very much when you're a persecuted church, you know that this means the gulag for you or death. So this is not a nice career move, huh? I get to wear nice things and whatever. I get a new car or something. Forget it. So that people know that, and they know that, and they, again, I didn't show them the stats. They trust the church, incredibly trust the church. You don't have the kind of scandals you'd have here anyway. But I mean, they trust the church, the complete trust in the church. Yeah. Other thoughts? Yeah, John. Please leave those that need to. Please. Yeah.
You just mentioned the term church persecuted. You talked about the church as a conservator of culture.
Yeah.
I was wondering your opinion on your friends dividing up the way Americans understand their culture, Ukrainians understand their culture, because it sounds to me like the culture you're describing also formed under persecution and in contradistinction.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I buy in. One of the things I found when I was there, when I was teaching, I taught in the licentiate program there, I found out I bought the secular view of culture. And I think maybe the Krondichs can speak to this, maybe, but if you notice in Eastern churches, that's not the case. The whole culture is basically to be divinized, huh? It is to reflect God, huh? So I found that their understanding of separation of culture from faith is not there. I came in with very Western eyes, expecting the culture to be secular. You accept secular culture. They don't. Huh? You don't. Well, my God, you're the director of the Catholic Studies program here. All right. You don't. But I mean, I did, clearly. I bought into this. I bought into the separation thing and this and that, and You know, you need to maintain a secular mindset, etc. Blah 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 blah. I did. There's no question. And then I looked again. I read some Armenian theologian by the name of Vigan Goroyan, and looked about what ideally it's supposed to be. It's supposed to reflect the divinity. It's supposed to reflect God. You know, this is God's good creation, and the world is to reflect God. You know, it's very different than the view that we have in the West. Yeah. Other thoughts, reflections? Yeah. Go ahead, Eric. I would say that there are many, Ukrainians are incredibly superstitious people. I'll give you one example. We're going to go to the Polish cathedral one Sunday, one of the guys in the house. And one of the things that struck me was that I said to Roman, let's sit out here, you know, divine liturgy was Mass. We're going to go to Latin Mass. Mass doesn't begin for 20 minutes. Let's sit there. He said, I'm not going to sit on a bench. I do not want to sit on a bench because if I sit on a bench, I'll become sterile because it's cold. I mean, I don't know where he got this, but he was concerned about that, all right? Maybe legitimately or unlegitimately, but I mean, it was that kind of sense. I mean, you know, they are incredible about everything. They will not do, I mean, they're incredibly super. Does that mean it's pagan? No, it means it's part of their culture. They're a superstitious lot. I mean, that's one of the, even the ones that are believers. You know, they ask, if I do this, will this happen? If I, you know, it's that stuff when you're a little kid, you don't walk on cracks, but it's consistently there, you know. Yeah, go ahead, Father. No. Thank you. Good. Relation. Oh, sure, yeah. Thank you. Other comments, reflections? Anyone else? Well, thank you very much for your attention. I'm sorry I went over. Thank you, Dr. I have some brochures and